About 130 years ago, construction began on an impressive Victorian-style hotel adjacent to a few unknown hot springs at the base of several rugged 14,000-foot peaks in the heart of the Rockies. This impressive structure was to be constructed in the newly formed Centennial State known as Colorado, in what seemed at the time to be the middle of the Wild West. At a time when the railroad was considered a novelty and most people still used horses for basic transportation, this architectural marvel was designed to rival the great European resorts of yesteryear, and its domes were built to impress and scrape the sky. Its location in the jagged and magnificent Chalk Creek Canyon, along with its spectacular views of Mount Princeton and Mount Antero, and its proximity to St. Elmo, one of Colorado's most thriving mining areas at the time, not to mention Leadville, back then a town larger than Denver, offered, at least in theory, a definitive advantage to becoming one of the most sought-after destinations in the United States and the world. However, despite its architectural splendor, magnificent location, and subsequent upgrades, along with its hot springs that offered remarkable geothermal non-sulfurous waters, this marvelous hotel did not survive the test of time and was an all-too-common example of Colorado's boom and bust history. On the other hand, its amazing waters and the resort concept, well, that's a different story. Although the grandiose Victorian hotel did not survive the test of time, its legacy and amazing geothermal waters have continued to delight and soothe bathers for over 130 years. And today, the newly remodeled and upgraded Mount Princeton Hot Springs Resort and Spa is rapidly reclaiming those old glory days with a different type of luxury aura, a rustic and quaint mountain-style charm, being one of the most picturesque destinations that Colorado and the United States have to offer. A historical yet modern resort that without doubt would please and make proud those early visionaries who never had a chance to see it come to full fruition. In the summertime, the resort offers no less than 7 geothermal pools of various shapes and sizes, creating an atmosphere that is hard to emulate even by the grand resorts of Europe.
The water selections at Mount Princeton Hot Springs Resort are phenomenal. You can choose from the adults-only side, which includes the relaxation pool and the 3 cascading pools, to the all-natural creek. You even have the choice of the historic bathhouse, as well as in the summertime, the upper pool with the 400-foot water slide. Each area varies in temperature, so you really can tailor your experience to what you're looking for. My favorite is the creek. There's nothing like it. The waters here at Mount Princeton contain a very minimal amount of sulfur, so they do not have the smell of eggs, so it creates a really unique hot springs experience.
Recently completed, Mount Princeton Resort's new luxurious spa has no less than 8 massage rooms, and like in its early days, provides a wide variety of refined services that help you relax and rejuvenate at the same time. However, if you're more the active type, no need to worry, as Mount Princeton has you covered too. In its effort to continuously improve the quality of service for all of its lodging guests, it now has a multitude of classes, including everything from spinning in one of the new fitness facilities to a wide selection of yoga classes, to even water yoga in warm geothermal yet non-sulfurous water.
Mount Princeton is expanding their fitness program. So currently we have a phenomenal water yoga class, which is a huge hit with any guest who walks in the door and our local residents. And we plan to continue our water classes over the course of the summer with a water cardio, a stroke refinement. Doing water classes at Mount Princeton is completely different than anything else you'd experience because the water is different here. It's warm, the environments are beautiful. No matter which pool you're in, you're surrounded by beauty everywhere.
For the active vacationer, the resort is the perfect hub and a convenient starting point for just about any type of mountain activity you can think of. From mountain biking its gentle slopes, to ATVing the nearby trails, to any other outdoor recreational activity that you can engage in Colorado's scenic outdoors. And if all of this activity makes you hungry, and you know it will, you can grab a smoothie at the resort's new juice bar, or have a casual dinner at the Mount Princeton Club restaurant, where just as 130 years ago, you can admire and marvel at the surrounding 14,000-foot majestic peaks. Romanticized in many Western movies, the Wild West was actually a very short and rough period. The discovery of gold in Pikes Peak country of the western Kansas Territory, the place that today we commonly refer to as Colorado, created the basis for one of the largest migration of settlers to the Rocky Mountain region. It would be safe to say that over 100,000 gold seekers took part in what turned out to be one of the greatest relocation of human souls in North America's history. Nicknamed the 59ers, referring to 1859, the peak year of what would eventually be known as the Colorado Gold Rush, these fortune hunters often used the motto, Pikes Peak or Bust. Interestingly enough, all of this happened quite a few years before Colorado became a territory in 1861. And some 17 years before it gained its centennial state status in 1876. By the mid-1860s, many struck gold and silver deep in the Rockies, including in the Collegiate Peaks area, where a myriad of camps popped up almost overnight. By 1885, at the peak of the mining boom, there were over 50 mines operating at full capacity around St. Elmo, as the Chalk Creek area was one of Colorado's largest and richest mining districts.
St. Elmo actually was quite a center of commerce in the late 1800s, serving as a dropping off point and a resupply point for many mines in the Chalk Creek Canyon. There was a few hotels, quite a few bars and saloons, mercantile, meat market, things of this nature. Really, it was the center of commerce for this county, being larger than Buena Vista or Salida were in the 1800s.
Due to its unprecedented growth, starting back in the 1870s, two railroads fought for supremacy, namely the Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad and the one that eventually became the Denver, South Park, and Pacific Railroad, with the latter playing a key role in the development of Mount Princeton Hot Springs Resort.
The railroad history in Chalk Creek Canyon is really one of interest, as the Denver-South Park Railroad came right through the Mount Princeton Hot Springs area.
And that's what this represents. Was very close to where the resort is now, and this bridge represents the bridge that was behind the resort.
And the railroad was a narrow gauge railroad, and the most interesting fact about it is the Alpine Tunnel was one of the first tunnels in the United States that actually went under the Continental Divide. So you were able to get on, in the Eastern Plains and actually get all the way over to the western slope without having to go over any huge grades. The tunnel went right through the divide.
This is the west side of the Alpine Tunnel. In other words, the side coming up from Gunnison. You go through Pitkin, Parlin, Ohio City, and up to this area. The engine house had a turntable in it so they could turn the locomotives. But interestingly enough, it burned, and they never rebuilt it.
With its peak at over 11,500 feet, or about 3,500 meters in altitude, the Alpine Tunnel was to become the highest as well as the most expensive tunnel ever built in its time. To get there, the railroad had to first power through the scenic Chalk Creek Canyon on what was, according to many accounts of the late 1800s, the most fascinating train ride in the world. But that was not without challenges.
The problem with Chalk Creek is the slopes on the north side of the creek are the chalk cliffs, which are very unstable rock. So instead they built on the south side of the canyon. The problem with the south side being it's in the shade for 6 months a year. So they had a terrible time fighting snow all the way up to the Alpine Tunnel, where they were always on the south slope of the canyon.
However, these were amazing times on the Colorado frontier as money was pouring in, creating a sense of prosperity and growing wealth. And in 1879, a coalition of wealthy miners established the Mount Princeton Hot Springs and Improvement Company that began the construction of a large hotel that would eventually be completed in 1884.
It's a mini testament to the boom and bust times that came through this beautiful canyon here. In the beginning, it was a simple stop-off point for people on horseback that were looking to resupply as they went up Chalk Creek Canyon for gold and silver mining. As this was developed and wells started to be generated from these mines, a very ornate 4-story hotel was built above the hot springs. It at one time boasted 2 spring-loaded dance floors, brass and copper call-down tubes that would actually be in the rooms where you could call down and ask for a drink of water or a stack of towels to be brought to your rooms.
It was a very elaborate structure. It had over 100 very spacious rooms. It was majestic and elegant. It had oak staircases and woods from all around the world. There were mahoganies and teaks. There were stained glass windows. There was an enormous dining room. They had a fleet of Cadillac convertibles to go down to Buena Vista to pick up guests.
Imagine going from that to just 20 years later that there was no more guests. St. Elmo was empty. There was no one on the train anymore. The train was no longer profitable. As gold and silver prices dropped, so did the receivership of the hotel and the occupancy at the Mount Princeton Hot Springs Resort.
The depot that stands in McPhellamy Park, right by the only stoplight in downtown Buena Vista, was originally built in the 1880s by the Denver South Park and Pacific Railroad about the time it changed its name to the Denver, Leadville, and Gunnison, one of several name changes on railroads common at the time. It served the railroad and the town into approximately 1920. The railroad stopped running trains into Buena Vista at that point.
In fact, by 1926, the railway running into the valley was torn apart, and by 1929, the whole property, including the Victorian Hotel, went into foreclosure.
There is a myth, of course, that the hotel burned down. It's not the case. In 1950, a Texas developer bought the property and came here from Texas with a crew and took 1 million board feet of lumber out of the hotel. They were all the fine woods, the oaks, the teaks, the mahoganies, and took it to Texas, to Abilene, and used all those fine woods to create new homes in Abilene.
Fast forwarding, the next significant year in the history of the resort was 1965, the time when the current main lodge was built on the site of the old hotel. And for the next 40 years, the area became once again a growing destination resort, gradually adding a few of today's standing structures. However, the most important event occurred in the early 2000s when the resort once again changed hands to its current owners, who have since remodeled all of the facilities and added a new state-of-the-art spa that offers 8 massage rooms and other refined services, a relaxation pool next to 3 Japanese-style cascading mini-pools, 30 Colorado-style log cabins, a modern events pavilion for weddings and special events, and countless other upgrades to the delight of both those young and young at heart who use these modern facilities.
The new project is the Estates at Mount Princeton Hot Springs. It is a resort-style living development that's a little bit down the road from the resort, so you kind of get a little removal from the touristy end of the hotel. But what it is it's a development that offers mountain-style living that still gives walking access back to the hotel amenities.
And last but certainly not least, with an eye on its glorious past, the new ownership recently announced that Mount Princeton Hot Springs Resort and Spa will soon have a new hotel built to somewhat resemble the old Victorian masterpiece, along with some other amazing developments that, well, you'll have to discover for yourself. Well, we know by now that the remarkable and rejuvenating geothermal waters at Mount Princeton Hot Springs have been used for many generations by various peoples, including the Ute Indians and the early mining pioneers. And we know that over the past 130 years, the resort with the same name has been attracting visitors from all over the world. But have you ever wondered where this water comes from? Why is it warm and geothermal, yet lacks the smell of sulfur that some other hot springs have? Or what makes this part of the Rocky Mountains so different, and what the geology is of the nearby mountain peaks?
The alteration, for example, at Chalk Cliffs, which is a prominent feature in the valley at Mount Princeton Hot Springs Resort, is caused actually by earlier larger hydrothermal systems, hot water systems, that occurred before the uplift of the collegiate range along the Saltwhite's Fault Zone. That occurred principally 4 to 6 million years ago. So those rocks were all deep under the surface at that time, and that alteration that created the Chalk Cliffs. Uplift occurred and lifted the collegiate range on the order of 25,000 feet, or 5 miles approximately. And that uplift was then led by the continued fracturing and folding along the Saltwhite's Fault Zone. And of course, later on, our valley here was cut by glaciers and exposed as we see them today.
Mount Princeton, with its elevation of 14,204 feet, and Mount Antero, with an elevation of 14,276 feet, are both part of the Collegiate Range, one of the most spectacular in the lower 48. And these two peaks, along with about 20 others that rise to altitudes of over 13,000 feet, provide not only the amazing scenery around Mount Princeton Hot Springs Resort, but also the geothermal yet non-sulfurous water for its numerous hot springs, including some that percolate directly into the riverbed of Chalk Creek.
The springs at Mount Princeton are located there because it's at an intersection of one of the main fractures parallel to the Saltwhite's Fault Zone, and again the east-west fracturing. Also, some of the water that's coming out of the springs is probably a mixture of all the water of all the springs in the area that are coming down and flowing down Chalk Creek under the surface. This is the lowest point of all the hot springs, lowest elevation point of all the hot springs in the Chalk Creek area. It's important to keep in mind that the waters here are a mixture of the geothermal waters that are actually heated out in the middle of the valley at great depths, greater than 7,000 feet down, along the great Rio Grande Rift Zone, which goes all the way from Leadville to northern Mexico. And that water comes up and then it is mixed with meteoric waters. The meteoric waters are basically rain and snow water. so that the waters that people use, that swim in the pools, all of that water is mixed geothermal and meteoric water. And the fault systems that are running along this black line are a series of fracture zones. And they come down in this picture along across here, and the main water is coming up under the old soaking pool, or present soaking pool, and there's a series of fractures under here that provide the actual waters for the little pools that people swim in along Chalk Creek. The heating part of it down along the Rio Grande Rift Zone comes from the fact that along the rift zone where the Earth is pulling apart and been doing so for 25 million years, the hotter mantle rocks are closer to the surface. So waters that get down along those faults gets heated to high temperatures.
Although the initial temperatures of the geothermal water is very high, the resort's cooling system allows usage in its pools at manageable temperatures that creates a soothing and rejuvenating experience.
The hot springs at Mount Princeton are about 145 degrees Fahrenheit, but that varies between spring runoff when the meteoric water is higher and the drier fall. So the temperatures vary about 5 degrees. The spring water is taken out of the springs under the big box built many years ago under the current soaking pool and is cooled with creek water by those big tanks you see at the end of the pool. And then that water is distributed to all of the pools and also to the water system within the resort.
These natural resources, and especially the electrical energy that can be obtained from these deep geothermal water systems of the hot springs, create the basis for a unique project that has the potential to become the first place in Colorado that will produce electricity using this environmentally friendly source of energy.
We are trying to explore the deep system of hot water associated with the hot springs, but out to the east. We look at this area from our current studies where the top of the geothermal system is the actual springs at Mount Princeton, but the root of the hydrothermal system out to the east towards the Rio Grande Rift Zone and at depth is about 2 miles east of here. That system could produce as much as 10 megawatts or more, and 10 megawatts is 7,000 homes of electricity. That water also, one way or another, will be incorporated, we hope, by the Hot Springs Resort in its efforts to become an environmentally destination-type resort. If we're successful with this project, working with Mount Princeton Hot Springs Resorts and others in the area, this will be the first electrical production in Colorado. Colorado is rich in geothermal heat, but to date, nobody's produced electricity from it.
So, now that you know all these interesting facts, make sure you book a cabin or room and stop by and impress everyone with your historical knowledge of this fascinating and beautiful resort.